This is Gemara in Kesubos Daf Chof. We really ended off on Yud Testament base, 3 lines from the bottom, but just to get ourselves back into the flow of things, let's pick it up from the Brisa on the bottom of Yud Testament base, about 7 lines up. The Gemara said, Tanu Rabbanan, Shnayim Chasuma Lashtaru, Mesu Bo Shnayim and Ashok Vam Yudanu, Sheksav Yadamuhu, Avalanusum Yiktanim Upsalezayu, Haril and. So what do we have? We have a star with signatures. And the 2 Eidim come in, and we have a star with signatures. And the Eidim that signed in the shtar were nifter. So how do we verify this document? 2 other Eidim come in and they say we recognize these signatures. They're Mekayim the shtar. But then they said, we recognize these signatures, but we also remember they were Ketanim. They were forced to sign, they were bustled to Eidos. What's the halacha? The Eidim are believed and you cannot collect with that shtar. But let's say, says the Brisa further, let's say you're able to verify this document without these Eidim. You have another document that you can verify this document with, then Ein Elun Emanim, then the Eidim are not believed. Says the Gemara, 3 lines from the bottom, asks the Gemara, Umagbina Be'ek Yishtar Ma'aliyah. Are you allowed to collect with this like a regular document? Meaning, we have 2 Eidim sitting here screaming, we know these signatures and they're false. But we have another document attesting to those signatures. Said the Gemara, we don't believe these 2 Eidim. Why not? Because the document is valid on its own, because we can prove the document from those 2 signatures. Ask the Gemara, you can be allowed to collect with this document. Vamai, you train into this, a classical case of a fight of 2 Eidim. You have the 2 Eidim in the shtar. So what are they saying? They're saying you can collect with this document based on the fact that we're Mekayim. We verify the signatures. Now we have 2 other Eidim screaming that no, you can't collect. So it's 2 and 2. 2 and 2 the halacha usually is, it blows up and you can't use it. Amar Rav Sheisha, says Rav Sheisha, is fundamental. Zoy Meres, we see from over here, Hachasha Chilas Hazamihi. That any time we're contradicting a witness, Hachasha is when 2 Eidim contradict another Eid. Says Rav Sheisha, that's the beginning, that's the starting blocks of Hazama. What is Hazama? As we turn over to today's daf of Yud Testament Aleph, Hazama is when I contradict the Eidim, not by saying you're false, by saying you couldn't have been there. You signed that Reuven lent Shimon $100 in New York on January 1st, but we were in midwinter vacation in Florida. You could not have been there. Imanu Yisem. But the halacha of Azama is, we turn over to Chaf Amud Aleph, just like there's a special halacha. You can't be mazimin, you can't say to the other Eidim, Imanu Yisem, you with us in Florida, unless they are there in Bezdin. Kach in Machishan as Eidim El B'fneim, you cannot contradict the witnesses unless you're in front of them, even to make it null and void. And therefore, what comes out, says Rav Sheisha, even though there are 2 people screaming that saying these 2 signatures are false, because we have a way to verify the signatures without them, you can't contradict the signatures because they're not in front of us. You cannot contradict Eidim unless he's in front of us. Answer of Rav Sheisha. Amrli Rav Nachman, asked Rav Nachman 3 lines down, Chaf Amud Aleph, Ilu Avekamon. As Rav Nachman, let's understand this 1 second. Let's say they were here. Let's say they were in Iftar. The 2 witnesses that signed the document, let's say they were alive and well and they were here. And what do? Machishanu. And they're fighting and they're saying it is good signatures. What's the halacha? Havei. They would have been contradicted. And then, what would have been? It would have been 2 versus 2. The 2 signatures on the document, the 2 Eidim coming in. 2 signatures are alive talking. The 2 people coming in. That's a fight 2 and 2, and you can't collect anything. Why? Because that's a classical case of a contradicted testimony, and you can't collect based upon that. Asks Rav Nachman, now that they're not here, but there's always the potential they would have admitted. And yet, they're going to be believed. Asks Rav Nachman, this makes no sense. If the 2 Eidim in the document were here, there's one of 2 things they would have done. Either they would have said, you're right, we were forced, we were ketanim, we were apostle, and now the document's no good. Or they would have been fighting, and they would have said it's kosher. But whatever they would have said, what without achavin? You can't collect the document. Why not? Because there's another 2 Eidim fighting with them. So either it's Trey and it blows up and you can't collect, or they're admitting and you can't collect. So as from Nachman, because they're not here, we're going to let you collect. Even though if they were here, there's 2 reasons to say you would not be able to collect. Elam Rav Nachman, Rav Sheisha, you're wrong. Uki Trey Laji Trey, Uki Monya B'cheskes Mari. Says Rav Nachman, no, you cannot collect with the document. It's Trey versus Trey, 2 Eidim fighting with 2 Eidim. It blows up. and wherever the money is where the money stays. It proves the Gemara. The Bar Shatia. Famous story. Just like the properties of Bar Shatia, this is proving the point of Rav Nachman. Says the Gemara, the Bar Shatia is of a nichse. Bar Shatia sold, that's a person's name, that he sold some property. Asu beitrei amruk shu shaita zavin. Two people came and said when he sold that document, he was a shait. When he sold that land, he was a shaita, and therefore the sale is null and void. Vasu beitrei, and two other people come va'amri shu chalim zavin. No, he was a healthy person when he sold it. So we have 2 versus 2 fighting whether Bar Shatia was indeed a kosher person when he made the sale. What is the halacha? Amar Rav Ashi, you could trade. They blow each other up. The 2 cancels out the 2. And therefore Bar Shatia keeps the mammon. Wherever the money is, it stays. Says the Gemara, so too by us. We have 2 versus 2. We have 2 signatures. Versus the 2 Eidim coming into Bezdin. 2 versus 2. The halacha is the money stays where it is. But the Gemara explains that this is only this is only if when there is a chazaka, the case of Bar Shatia, we only let him keep his land if he had a chazaka that this was his back to when he belonged to his father. If he didn't have a chazaka, then we say he sold it when he was a shaita, he bought it when he was a shaita, and then we do not say Ukitrei he keeps the land. Rather, we say that he bought it when he was a shaita, and he's trying to sell it now when he's a shaita. Now it's not his anymore, because the original sale was when he was a shaita. And that is the difference, whether it is a chazaka or not. And that is the opinion of Rav Ashi. Amar Rav Avua, says Rav Avua, Ein mazimin es eidim al b'fneim. Going back to the top of the Amud, we contrasted and compared our case of Achasha, of the 2 eidim contradicting the 2 signatures, with the case of Hazama, of saying Yimanu Yisim, you're with us elsewhere. Says Rav Avua, Ein mazimin es eidim al b'fneim. I agree with that premise. You're only allowed to contradict by saying you're with us if you're in front of the witnesses. Umachishin es eidim shaloi b'fneim. But you're allowed to contradict witnesses not in front of them. Says Rav Avua, arguing on the opinion of Rav Sheshes, on the first opinion of the Gemara, which was Rav Sheshes. And if you are mazin them, if you said Imanu Yisem not in front of them, very gishmak. There's unique halachas of Azama. When I say you were there, you were Manu Yisem, you were with us in Florida, it's not just saying you were apostle. It's true. It's true that it's possible and the document's null and void because you weren't there. But there's a unique halacha of Hazama that the Eidim have to do what they try to do someone else, what you try to be mechayiv him. You, the Eidim, are mechayiv. That halacha is only bifneim. But let's say shaloi bifneim. Let's say the Eidim are not in Bezdin, and 2 witnesses come in and contradict them by saying they were not there. The halacha is you do not have a status of Eidim Hazama to the point that you're going to get the special halacha to do what you tried to do. But you are Eidim Achash and you are contradicted. Says the Gemara, let's delve a bit deeper into this brisa. Amar Mar. Let's not delve with this price. This is the first price on the bottom of Amud Beis, which we started with and we ended with yesterday. We said over there that if there's Eidim, that this is their signatures. Or we're able to verify the signatures from another document. Now, what other type of document? We explained this yesterday, we didn't explain this again today. Again, Reuven says to Shimon, you owe me $100, and here's the document. Shimon says, prove that the document's kosher. Prove to me those witnesses are real. Reuven says, no problem. He goes to find the witnesses and he finds out, they were nifter. How could he be Mekayim? How could he certify his document? So Reuven either could get 2 witnesses to testify, or he could get another document and compare the 2 signatures to show it's a good document. Now, if he finds another document, what type of document does he need to compare to this document? Said the Braisa, Mishtar Shekara Alav Error. It has to be particularly from a document in which there was a question on that document, and after the question, they went to Bezdin and they settled the dispute and they proved it was a good document. Bezdin stamped that document. Now that document is a kosher document, and that document can be used for contrasting purposes. Then ein namanim. then the new witnesses are not believed. Says the Gemara, let's delve, let's understand this brisa. It sounds like the only way to certify the document is with another document that what happened? There was an error, there was a question on it, and he certified it in Bezdin. But it sounds like if I just have another document that there was no error on it, so another document with the same signatures, I cannot be Makayim it. And at that point, says the Gemara, Misayli Ravasi, Dam Ravasi is a proof. Ein Mekayim is a shalom mishar shekar of error, v'hochzak, bebezdin, a clear proof to the din in our brisa. Now, once we're on the topic of certifying documents, the Gemara brings the Nardai, Amri Nardai, about 50 lines from the bottom of Chaf Amud Aleph. Ein Mekayim is a shtar el mishtei Kesubos. The Nardai said the only way to certify a document is with two Kesubos, two Kesuba documents, or from two field documents, in which the owner ate there for 3 years peacefully, there was no issues, and there's a document stating that it's his. That document is the type of document, says the Nahardai, they could use to prove another document, again, by comparing the two sets of signatures. Says Rav Simar Ashi, the only din of Nahardai, they could prove it from a Ksuba, you could prove it from another document that they ate in the field, is only if he's holding the document himself. But if someone else, it's only if someone else has the document, but if he has the document, no. Again, let's play out the case. Reuven tells Shimon, you owe me $100, and Reuven has the document proving that point. And now Reuven wants to certify that document. So if Reuven himself has another document with the same signatures, he cannot use that document to prove his point. The only way he can prove his point, if he finds someone else that has a document, has a ksuba, has something, then he can prove it. Says the Gemara, why? Why does it not work if he's holding the document itself? Because maybe he forged this document. He was able to copy it perfectly. He says Gemara again. So even if someone else has it, maybe he saw it and then he copied it, so maybe it's still a forged document. Says the Gemara, you can't forge it that well just by looking at another document. You won't be able to forge it. Therefore, if you yourself has the document, you cannot prove it, but if someone else does, then you can. Tanu Rabbanan, after, again, we're on a tangent over here, after we just finished discussing certifying b'mekayim ashtar, now we go to other types of things that are in shtaros, that are written up in Bezdin. Tanu Rabbanan, 7 lines to the bottom, Kesubos adam edusay al ashtar umeid alav, afil lachar kama shanim. You come into Bezdin, and you have to testify about something, but you don't remember, the thing happened 20 years ago. So what you're allowed to do is you're allowed to make yourself notes. When you see something, someone witnesses a murder, someone witnesses a loan, someone witnesses a sale, and he knows he's an aid, and he's not sure if he's remembered, he's allowed to write it down. But the din is, in order to give edus in Bezdin, it has to be al pi edim, has to be from their mouth, and it can't be mipi aksav, it can't be written. It has to be oral testimony and not written testimony. But you're allowed to write down your testimony as a reminder to yourself, not to show Bezdin it's written, no. But you could have a document reminding yourself what happened, says the Braisa. It's true. You have to remember on yourself. You can't go into Bezdin and pick up the paper and just read that, oh, something 20 years ago, this is what happened. That doesn't work. If you looked at the document and reminded you, jogged your memory, that's okay, but you can't read it from the document. No, even if you don't remember it, the fact that you wrote it down and you saw it and now you're telling it over, that is enough to be considered oral testimony. Amar Rabba says, Rabba Shmami Namid Rav Yochanan. From this last statement of Rav Yochanan, which Rav Yochanan said, you do not have to remember it. You're allowed to read your own written testimony that considered an oral testimony of an aid. Shmami Na, you know, we learn from here, says Rabba, 4 lines on the bottom. Hanu Beitrei Diyadi Sadusa. 2 people. No testimony. Umanshi chad meinayu, and one of them forgets. Midkar chad lechavrei, one to remind the other. Because we see from Rabbi Yochanan, you're allowed to remind yourself, and you don't even have to remember. You're allowed to read it from the Ksav. Says Rabbah, similarly, when there are 2 Eidim in Bezdin, one of them forgets, the other one can remind him of the story. But now the Gemara has a fundamental shayla. Atzmai mai. What about, can one of the people in the din Taira, is he allowed to be the one to remind him. Now let's just look at one Rashi we should have said in a moment. Rashi says, 2 lines from the bottom, mi piyam v'lo mi pi ksavam. That's the drasha proving us that it has to be an oral testimony. But now the Gemara's question is, can the Baal Din himself, can one of the litigants, the Malva, the Leivik, can he say to the Eidim, remember what happened? Remember you were there? Can he jog his memory? Says the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom, Rav Chaviva Amar afilu atzmai, Mar Rav Ashi Amar atzmai loi. What's the halacha of Elchasa atzmai loi? It does not help to remind him on yourself. However, says the Gemara, as we turn over to Chafam and Beis, V'yitzur meira abananu, afilu atzmai. If he's the Talmud Chacham, you can even remind him about him himself. Why? Says Rashi in the second line. Because if the fact that he's the Talmud Chacham, if he did not remember on himself, he would not come and give Eidos. So what's the concern? The concern is if one of the litigants reminds him, we're afraid the Eid is not going to really remember, and he's just going to repeat what he says. But says the Gemara, if he's a Surba Meirabanim, he's a Talmud Chacham, we don't have that concern, and he's even allowed to be reminded by one of the parties themselves. And an example of this, Ki Adi Rav Ashi, Aviyadlib Sadutz Rav Kahana. Rav Ashi knew about Eidos about Rav Kahana, Amar Le Midacher Mhar. Rav Kahana said to Rav Ashi, do you remember? Hi Saduso, what happened? And then what happened? He said, he reminded him, isn't this what happened? I don't remember. But then the Saifidkar, in the end he remembered. And then the Gemara says, and that is enough. Rav Ashi, and instantly, and he gave testimony after he remembered. And he saw Rav Kahana that he was like a bit upset. Seemingly, how could you have given Eidos? And Amar Le Rav Ashi explained, because I'm chinan. Do you think I'm relying on what you told me, Rav Kahana? You think I don't remember? No, I thought about it, and I remembered. So we see a Talmud Chacham is believed to say, even though you were the one that jogged my memory, at the end of the day I remembered, and therefore it's Eidos mipihem from their mouth, v'loy mipi ksavam. Says the Gemara tonight also, we learned in a Mishnah, 8 lines down, the first word line is ve'ad kari on chava midbeis. Hatululi ois, hakuroivais, abein le'ir, abein le'derech. If we have a mount, we have a pile, and we have a pile that's near either the city or a road, echad chadashes, echad yeshenus, whether this pile of dirt is new or old, tameos it's tummy. Harchaikais, if it's far away from the city or the field or the road, so what is going on over here, as we'll see in a moment, what's going on over here is when you have a mound, you have to be concerned what is in that mound. Maybe there's a dead body in that mound. Maybe there's a dead fetus in that mound. Maybe someone had a limb that fell off and he buried it in that mound. So we do not know. So based off of the lack of knowledge, the Mishnah says, if it's near to the city or the road, it's automatically Tameh. We assume there's some level of Tameh inside. If it's far away from the city or the road, then a new one is Tar and an old one's going to be Tameh. And through the explanation, we'll understand what in the world does that do with our Gemara. First, the Mishnah Brisa says, is there a Kraiva Chamisha Mama? Bezu Yishana, Shishim Zana, 60 years, Devi Rameir. Rav Yehuda, no. What's Kraiva? Shein Kraiva Imenu. There's nothing closer than it. The first mount to the city or the road, however far that is, that's called Karov. The next one is called Rachik. Yeshena, what's old? Shenadam Zeichel, and no one remembers it. And of course, that's why this Gemara is doing here, because it's to do with memory. We saw in the previous Gemara about reminding someone, and it's telling, do you remember or not? So too over here, the Gemara is teaching us whether you remember. Do you remember what happened to this grave? To this mound, excuse me. Do you remember whether this mound has a grave in it or not? So now the Gemara explains a bit deeper. My year or my derech, what does it mean that we have a mound, a pile of dirt, near a city or road? If you're going to tell me it's actually a road or actually a town, we have a mount near a random city, near a random road, and you tell me that every time the suffix you're saying it's going to be tamei? How can you say that? They found a reason, and they said Eretz Yisrael to be tar. When we're not sure in Eretz Yisrael, we say something is tar. So why are you telling me that when you have a mound of dirt near any city or any road, we're automatically going to say it's tamei? Amar Rav Zera, you know why? Doesn't mean a stam, any city or road. It means a road or a city near a cemetery. That is the reason why there's concern that there might be tumah in the mound, in the pile of dirt, because of the proximity to the Beis HaKvaros. And now we go a little bit deeper. I understand when there's a road going to a grave, what might have happened? It's getting close to nightfall. And they don't have anywhere to bury the person, so they quickly found a pile. They found a pile of dirt close to the city, close to the Beis HaKvaros, close to the road in the Beis HaKvaros. They buried inside. But says the Gemara, if you have a town that's close to a Beis HaKvaros, everyone's going to go all the way to the Beis HaKvaros. So why, if we have just a mound of dirt near the town, and the town is near the Beis HaKvaros, we automatically assume that it's going to be Tamei? Amar Rav Chanina, you know why? If a woman has a miscarriage more than 40 days, of course, then the fetus has a din toma, has to be buried. That fetus, where does a woman bury it? Says Rav Chanina, she buries it within a city, because she's not going to walk out all the way on her own. So what does she do? She finds a pile of dirt, and she buries it in there. That's why we assume when there's a pile of dirt near a city with a basic varais, that we assume it's going to be tamei. And also similarly, someone that has some sort of disease in his bodies, or Isaiah and their limb fell off, as well, we're going to assume that's where they're going to be buried it. That's the reason why you're going to assume there's going to be tama in that area. But now we continue and almost conclude. The Gemara says, Ad chamisha ma'ama. Up to 50 amos. What's 50 amos? You know what it is? A woman will go on her own. So now I understand that within 50 amos of this city, the mound is going to be tummy, because that's the normal proximity. A woman will go travel on her own to bury her fetus. Therefore, we have to assume the mound is tummy. Tfei, more than 50 amos. Dibra inish bahada, more than 50 amos. Dabra inish bahada, she takes a man with her. She's not going to go all the way that far out by herself. Rather, she'll go to the cemetery. And that's the reason why. So more than 50 amos, we don't assume it to be tummy in Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because a woman will not go there on her own. So what seemed to be an innocent din that we learned about this mound, we're learning so many more details. We're learning that the reason is that maybe there was a burial that ran late and they buried it there. Or within the town, the woman buried it there, so she didn't have to go so far out on her own. Amar Rav Chisda Shema Min Amar Rav Meir. I said, do so. You know, we learn from Rav Meir a fascinating idea, say Rav Chisda. If you're testifying, Ad Shitin Shnin Midkar Tfeiloi Midkar. For the fact that we said what's new and what's old is 60 years, you know what that shows us? You can only give testimony up to 60 years. More than 60 years ago, you don't remember, it sounds like, says Rav Chisda. So you can't give testimony in a case more than 60 years. The Gemara says, no, V'lahi. What are we discussing? We're discussing, do you remember what was in a random mound outside the field? So it's not something you think about. So up to 60 years, you could potentially remember. But if you actually have a lacha, if you saw something, you saw a murder, you saw a wedding, you saw any other type of eidos, kivon derami alei, afilu tuvanami, the wonderful brain, the intellect, the capacity to remember is much more than 60 years. And if you say you remember, then we assume that you are believed and has nothing to do with Rav Chisda. Let's see the Mishnah before we call it a day. Says the Mishnah, continuing on the theme of being mekayim, of certifying a shtar. One person comes into Bez and says, oh, that's my signature, and that's my friend's signature. Another guy says, it's my signature, my friends. They are believed. However, each one testifies about their own signature. They don't say anything about the other one. You have to get a third person because you only have one aid. Why not? The person is believed to say this is my signature, and that itself makes the document mikuyam, and that's itself enough. When one person is saying it's mine, you do not need a second person, says the Chachamim, which the Gemara will deal with more. We'll pick it up from here in the next year in Mirza Hashem.